Math 3, Unit 7, Section 5. So today we're going to talk about transformation of parabolas, which we've done in the past. We've done a lot of this. Now, the difference today is that now we know about this C value and our focus and directrix. We also now have sideways parabolas as well. Okay, so the first thing when we end up getting through these equations is that if there are any x squareds, then you want to solve for y, and if there are y squareds, then you end up solving for x. So that's going to kind of tell you which formula you're going to have, okay? When you have your translation, so if it's a y equals graph, we know the graph is going to go up or down, right? And when you're going up or down, remember that your focus is always inside your parabola and your directrix is always on the outside. So your graphs look like this. Well, now our vertex may not start at 0, 0. And so this is very similar to what we've done before in that if it's adding C at the end, that's when we're going to go up. If it's subtracting C, we go down. If it's inside the parenthesis, remember we do the opposite. So that means on this plus C, we'd go left. And on the minus C, we would go right. So this is all no big deal. Over here, because the x and the y have switched places, all of these things as well kind of switch places. So when you have a plus C value, that's actually talking about the x value. And so if you have a plus C, you would end up going right. And if you have a minus C, you would end up going left. Because inside the parenthesis is going to be your y value. So that means outside the parenthesis is where you have your x. So in here, if you have a plus C, you're still going to do the opposite, but this time it's the opposite with the y. So instead of going up, you would end up going down. And then the minus C, you would end up going up. And again, if you notice, it's because you have a y in the parenthesis with it. And so you're solving for that y value, which means you'd have the opposite y. And then, I forgot to write right here, but this is where you have your graphs that will be going left or right, looking like that. Ish. Okay, and then the next step, once I suggest that you kind of decide what's happening first on your graph. Maybe draw a little picture for yourself to remind you what you're going to be doing. And then after that, this is when we go 4C equals your denominator and solve for C. Here it says you could include the negative sign if present, but you don't have to, okay? You're going to know which way your graph is curving. You know which way the focus goes versus the directrix, because you're always going to go a positive C and a negative C, right? So the negative I don't feel like really matters, except for it's telling you which direction it's going in terms of the curve. Okay, so the next thing is just if you have 1 over cx squares, use C to go up or down. Bless you. And that's when you have your y equals graph. You're using your C value to go up and down. And then if you have x equals, you're using your C value to go, very good, left or right. You can graph the directrix by making your dotted line going the same distance from the vertex. And then you find your two focal points by multiplying 2 by C. Okay? And so that's telling you from your focus, you're going that much distance, just like we did yesterday. And then you'll graph your parabola. Okay, so I feel like that's a lot of steps and a lot of information, and sometimes it's easier to just get the information from the problem. Okay, so we're going to start with one where it's x equals, where I feel like it's slightly more challenging. We need to always find our vertex first. Okay, so with our vertex, based on kind of the information that I've told you already, do you have an idea of what you think the vertex might be?
-1, -3.
Close. Do you see how this says y plus 1? This is giving us our y value. So that means that the y value is going to be what?
Oh,
Negative 1. Okay, so the y, if this is y plus 1, it's going to stay with the y value of the vertex. So in the y value of the vertex, it's going to be negative 1. And then this is the x value, which will be negative 3.
So it just flips around.
It just flips around, exactly. And so that's what we were talking about here. And so the part in the parenthesis with the y, it's shifting it up and down. It's sticking with the y value. Does that make sense? And so when you're looking at this, whatever's in parentheses, that is giving you the value for your y of the vertex. Is that pretty easy? Okay, so let's plot that first. Now that we have the vertex, let's plot that. So left 3, down 1, make our point. Now this graph, is it going to end up curving right or left or up or down? Because it's x equals, it's going to be going right. The curve will go right. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of draw this here to remind myself when we're doing stuff, which means my focus is going right and my directrix is going left. Does that make sense? So since it's x equals, that means our curve's going with the x-axis. When it's y equals, the curve's going with the y-axis. Okay, and then because it's positive here, we go right. The focus is inside, directrix is on the outside. Okay, so how do we know how far to go for the focus and directrix?
It's off of, well, 4c equals 8.
Good. So we're going to go 4c equals our denominator, which is 8. We divide by 4 to both sides, and we get c equals 2. So from your vertex, we're going to go 2 to the right for my focus. And then we go 2 to the left for the directrix. And we can write those values down. So what is the point for my focus?
-1,
Very good. -1 is correct. And what's the equation for my directrix?
x equals
Good. X equals -5. And so remember that the distance that we go from the focus on each side is 2c. So that means we're going to go the distance of 2 times 2, which equals 4. And so we go 1, 2, 3, 4 up. And it's kind of going off the graph there. And then down 1, 2, 3, 4. Also know that this whole distance here should equal the denominator. And 4 plus 4 does equal 8. Okay? And then we make our curve. And then we just need to write our focal chord endpoints. And so what are those values?
-1, -5, and
-1, +3, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, do we have any questions there or anything that's a little bit confusing? So even though it's x equals, does that kind of make sense for the vertex and all that stuff?
This is what we're doing already.
Except for we were starting at 0, 0 every time. So the difference now is we're not starting at 0, 0. That's it. I know, it's crazy. Okay. Yes, so we're going to cross off this page, and we already kind of did that there. And so now we're going on to example B. Now this is a little different because it doesn't have like y equals or x equals. So can you see which one's squared? Is it x squared or is the y squared? X is squared. So that means we want to get the y by itself, okay? So some people want to distribute the 2, but that will actually make it more difficult. So I would start by dividing both sides by 2, okay? So when I divide by 2 to both sides, I will end up writing the left side as 1/2 x minus 3 squared equals y plus 1. And then what would I need to do next in order to get y by itself?
Subtract 1.
Subtract 1. Is everybody okay with this? So in order to get rid of the 2 in front of the parenthesis, We're just dividing both sides by 2 to cancel that out. And when you're dividing that by 2, it's the same as 1/2. So I'm just bringing it to the front because that's really my 1 over 4c. And so we have 1/2 and the x minus 3 squared. And then now to get the y by itself, I'm subtracting 1 to both sides. So it cancels out, and I'm just going to flip this around. So I'm going to write this as y equals 1/2 parenthesis x minus 3 squared minus 1. And then this is set up like how we're used to parabolas being set up, because it's y equals. So on this graph, is my curve going to be going up, down, right, or left?
To the right
Up, right? Because it's y equals, so that means our curve would either be going up or down because it's going with the y-axis, and the y-axis is up and down. And because it's positive, we know that it's going to end up curving up. So I'm just going to draw myself a little picture that this is what it should end up looking like. That way I can make sure I'm doing something right, okay? So before I can start now, I need to write my vertex. So what will be my vertex for this problem?
3 negative 1.
Good. 3 negative 1. So whatever's in parentheses, we would set this equal to 0 and solve for x. And since it's saying x equals 3, it goes to the x part of the vertex. Whatever isn't in parentheses, that goes to the other part, okay? And it doesn't change signs. So we go 3 and down 1. So write 1, 2, 3, down 1, and we have our vertex. How do I figure out the distance that I go for my c value?
4c equals 2.
Good. So we take 4c, and we set it equal to 2. Whatever our denominator is here, that's what we set it equal to. When I divide by 4 to both sides, I get that c equals 1/2. Very good. Oops, sorry. So with that, with c equaling 1/2, and we're like, okay, this is going up and down, so I know that I'm going to go up 1/2 in order to get my focus. So we go up 1/2, make a point, and if you want to, you could put an F there to remind yourself it's the focus. And then we go down 1/2 for our directrix. Okay, so what is the point at the focus? What is that ordered pair?
3
Good. 3 negative 1/2. Good. And then my directrix is what?
Y equals negative 1/2.
Very good. Okay, and then in order to figure out the distance that I go from my focus to get my focal chord endpoints, we just multiply 2 times c, so 2 times 1/2 ends up making what? 1. So from the focus, we go right 1 and left 1. And that distance should also add to be my denominator, and it does. 1 plus 1 makes 2. And so then we can draw our curve. And what are my focal chord endpoints?
2 negative 1/2.
Good. 2 negative 1/2.
And 4 negative 1/2.
Good.
I'm on top of this section.
Okay, any questions before we move on? We're good? Pretty easy? Okay, so what are you going to do on C first?
Divide by 10.
Good, divide by 10. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this. So we have it as x equals 1/10, and then we have y minus 2 squared. I'm going to do the vertex together, and then I'm going to let you guys try the rest on your own. So what is my vertex for this problem?
0, 2.
Very good. So do we see how this is the y part? So when we set that equal to 0, that's going to go in the y part of my vertex. Since there's nothing being added to the end, the x value is 0. So 0, 2 is 0, and then up 2. Okay, you're on your own. Once you get the answer, raise your hand, or if you need help, I'm going to come around and check.
Gosh, Charlie, no problems.
2 is 2.5. Okay, so that means which direction should your curve be going?
It's a sideways one.
And so that means for your vertex, you're going to go 2.5 right for your focus.
It was an area so I can read it. Just was chemistry or everything down there. You're fairly serious.
And that's 1. So you divide there, you get C equals 2.5. And that's easy to calculate.
think I understand it.
Because you know, to count 2.5. So now go by that, you know, to go.
Add and subtract. It's okay, we have to join the string.
I struggle with that. Serious? You met me? I struggle with that. For whatever reason, everyone in my class thinks that I'm just the smartest person in the world. Like, every time I say something wrong,
So is it gonna go right or
I'm
left?
like, okay, I feel better about myself. I'm like, guys, I'm not that smart, Jesus.
Oh yeah, so I guess my last week, actually. You like to see me?
peanut butter.
You could really genuinely, that was
It's hard.
Oil life.
Okay, I'm gonna start going through this one. And so, we always set our denominator equal to 4c. So 4c equals 10. When I divide by 4 to both sides, I get c equals 2.5. Everybody good there? The other thing that I suggest you do is that you should look at your equation, and since it's x equals, we know that our curve is going to be going with the x-axis. So that means, and because it's positive, my curve is going to be going to the right. And my focus will go right, and then my directrix ends up going towards the left. So once we have our vertex, and I know that C is 2.5, I go 2.5, and that's my focus to the right, and then 2.5, and that is the line for my directrix. Okay. So, what are the ordered pairs?
2.5.
Good. So for the focus, it is 2.5, comma, 2. And my directrix, what is the equation? X equals negative 2.5, right? That's at 2.5. Okay. And then how do we do our focal chord endpoints? Yeah, it's 2c. So that means it's 2.5 times 2. And so that equals 5. And focal chord endpoints are from your focus. So you're going to go 5 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5 down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you can make your curves. What is the ordered pairs for the focal chord endpoints?
2.57.
Good.
2.5 negative 3.
Perfect. Okay, are there any questions about this one? No? We're good? Okay, let's go ahead and turn the page. And again, this is just like yesterday when we are writing our equations. The only difference is we don't have 0, 0, which can make it slightly more difficult. So I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible. First of all, you have your focus, and we just have that written as AB right now because it can be any two numbers, right? But our focus is going to be an actual point. Those are going to be numbers for A and B. And then we always have our generic point that we use, which would be X and Y. Okay? And then we understand that whatever the directrix is, we put in the letter for the other part of the directrix. The one important thing, and everything else is the same where we're doing the point to the focus equals the point to the directrix. The only difference that you need to pay attention to is this step number 5. This one is super important. And so when you're going through it, you will distribute the two terms containing the same variable, but leave the third term factored. And that'll make sense once we get to it. And then you'll combine like terms and solve. Okay, so let's go down to example D here. So they've given us the focus here and our directrix here. Okay, and so we know that we want to do a point to the focus. So our point is XY and our focus is -2, 1 equals, and then our point to our directrix. And so the point again is XY. And then, I guess I should have labeled these P, F, P, and then this is D. So for my directrix, since I have X equals 2, I put 2 in for the X spot, but my Y spot I'm just going to write as Y. If I had Y here, we would have put that in for the Y, and the other part would have been X. Okay, so everybody's good there? Okay, and then the same thing again, we're going to write out our distance formula. Okay? And so our distance formula, we're going to have X minus -2 squared plus Y minus 1 squared equals, on the other side, we're going to have X minus 2 squared plus Y minus Y squared. Okay, questions up to this point?
Don't forget to write the other side of the parentheses.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna skip a step and square both sides right now so I don't have to like write it multiple times. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
I think you guys will be okay. Good. All right, so that means I'm gonna end up with X plus 2 squared plus Y minus 1 squared equals X minus 2 squared. Because Y minus Y makes 0 and 0 squared is still 0. Okay, do you see how two of the variable sets are similar and one is different?
See.
So depending on if it's an X equals equation or a Y equals equation will change, okay? For this case, whenever you have two that are the same, these ones are the ones that you're going to multiply out and combine. This one you will not multiply out. You're going to leave it just like this. This is part of your equation in the correct form. So whichever ones are the same, those are the ones you're multiplying out so that you can combine them together. The other one, don't do anything. Is that clear? So that's what I mean in step 5. Distribute the two terms containing the same variable but leave the third term factored. Okay? So when we multiply out X plus 2 squared, what does that make?
X squared plus 4x plus 4.
Perfect. Plus, and we keep the Y minus 1 squared equals, and then multiply out X minus 2 squared.
X squared minus 4x plus 4.
Perfect. And we know that anytime we have like terms on both sides, what can I do?
Multiply them out.
Cancel them out. Good. So X squareds cancel out, my positive 4s cancel out. And so right now I have 4x plus Y minus 1 squared equals negative 4x. What would I do now?
Subtract 4x.
Or
Close. Oh yeah, subtract 4x is right, sorry. So these cancel out, and I have Y minus 1 squared equals, and negative 4x makes And then we want x by itself, so what do I do? Good, divide by -8 to both sides. This cancels out. And so I have -1/8 y minus 1 squared. In fact, I'm going to put x equals in front, but you could have it on either side. And you have your equation. Questions? Okay, so let's do E. Do you guys want to try it on your own?
Yeah.
See.
Okay, when you get it, raise your hand and I'll come by and check. Or if you want help, I can come and help. Gabby, how come you're not trying to do this?
I've been trying. Yeah. Go, just go, you're fine.
Okay. Why don't you stop where you're at? And I'm gonna start going through it and you can kind of see if you're doing it right or wrong. Okay, so again, my point is gonna be x, y, and my focus is 1, 1. And then we have our point, which will be x, y. And my directrix will be what?
X.
X3. Because since y equals 3, that goes in the y spot. Okay? And so we're going the distance of PF equals the distance of PD. So we have this square root. Using our distance formula, we have x minus 1 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals the square root of x minus x squared plus y minus 3 squared. So far, so good for everybody? Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead and just square both sides. And I end up with x minus 1 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals y minus 3 squared. Okay, which two are the same? The y's. So I'm going to keep the x the way it is. Okay, so that means I have x minus 1 squared plus, and when I multiply this out, I'm going to get
Y squared minus 2y plus 1.
perfect. Equals, and we multiply out this side, and we get y squared
Minus 6y plus
plus 9. Okay, and again, you could always like FOIL or factor that or box it if you wanted to multiply it out. So like terms we can cancel out. So in this case, I'm going to cancel out what?
Y squared.
Y squareds. Am I able to cancel out any numbers? No. Okay, but I would suggest putting everything to one side because we want to end up getting the y so it doesn't have a number in front of it. So I'm going to add 2y and subtract 1 at the same time. Okay, and so we end up with x minus 1 squared equals negative 4y
Plus 8.
plus 8. Now, the reason why I did it this way is because remember back at the beginning on example B, see how with the y to get the number out, they had a number factored out in front?
Yeah.
And so if your y ends up having a number in front and stuff, it's easier if I have a plain number and the y, to put them together so that I can factor it out. Does that make sense what I'm saying? And so in this case, what would I end up factoring out? Negative 4, and I'd be left with what? Y minus 2, good. And so to get rid of the negative 4, divide by negative 4 to both sides. And so that cancels out, so I'd write this as negative 1/4 x minus 1 squared equals y minus 2. And then the last step would just be to add 2. And we have it in the correct form. So it'll be y equals negative 1/4 x minus 1 squared plus 2.
There's no 2 in your comment.
Okay. All right, any questions, anything you want me to go back through there?